everyone, it's Bob Crossan, Senior Managing Editor for Water and Waste Digest. I am joined today by Mark Turpin. He is President of DuParon Corporation, and we're going to be talking about the municipal wastewater market, trends that Mark is seeing there, and some of the advancements that are coming down the pipe. So, Mark, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you taking the time with us today.
Thanks for having me, Bob. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's a very interesting time for the water and wastewater market. And before the call, we were talking about just how busy it actually can be. Could you kind of give an idea of like what is the current climate for business in the wastewater market?
I think it's extremely strong. I think it's very strong across the board. And then with new funding coming in, with the bipartisan infrastructure law, I think it's just going to get stronger over the next 3 years. It looks very encouraging, I think,
Mhm.
across the board for technologies in water and wastewater.
Yeah, how about the industrial side? So obviously that municipal side, we have the bipartisan infrastructure law and a lot of government funding that's there. But what about that industrial side? It's my understanding that side's also pretty looking pretty strong right now.
Yeah, I think it has been moving. I think it has been moving very strong, Bob. The concerns that I have there around inflation, and as the cost of money goes up, the cost of capital goes up, you may see a pullback on the industrial side until we can get that straightened out and that access to capital becomes freer again. And I think also that's going to show up on the international markets, especially in the developing world, I guess, primarily in the developing world, as it's more difficult to access money for investment. We may see a pullback for a period of time
Mhm.
in those markets as well. But municipally in the U.S., it's extraordinarily strong right now, and I think there are tailwinds for the next, well, of course, 5 years through that funding period. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and crossing fingers that there's more to come after that as well. But I wanted to pivot a little bit to the equipment side too. I want to talk about some of the advancements and drivers that you're seeing there. Are there certain things that are happening in the marketplace that are driving advancements or changes in the way that you guys are trying to develop products and equipment?
Yeah, I think, of course, there are emerging contaminants and then PFAS. I think you probably hear about that a lot. What we're focused on a lot is the impact of climate, particularly around, there being droughts, a lot of need for water recycle, water reuse, um, particularly where there's a large amount of population in the Southwest and the West. And then in other regions of the country, there's historic rainfalls on a regular basis. And so, how do you manage the impact of that on your customers and on communities? And so, we've been thinking a lot about that, and some of our newest products are designed towards, um, where there's the historic events that we're facing from a rainfall standpoint, for sure. And DuParon does a lot on the stormwater side, and we have for a long time. So we're very present to what's happening there. I think those things are driving a lot of our thoughts around development, and I see that happening even in filtration, where you're thinking about storm flows and how do you handle those storm flows without having direct bypass and discharge.
Mhm.
So it occurs to me there's a lot of that kind of thing going on right now in the market.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
focus more specifically on like the headworks and screening. I know that's like a big part of your business. How have those technologies changed over the years? You mentioned this stormwater element becoming a bigger and bigger part of the business. Has that always been the case, or is that kind of a newer thing? And are there other aspects of the business that have kind of you've had to adapt that to things over the years?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, when you're designing a headworks, when engineers are designing the headworks, they have to think about peak flows,
Hmm.
max peak flows. They have to think about historic events. I think the difference may be, or at least what we're hearing, is that those are becoming more and more frequent. And so, what we've been thinking about, is if you have a site that, let's say, is designed at 4 million gallons a day as an average flow, but they're peaking at 25, 30 MGD. What does that mean from a design standpoint? So if you think about it, if you have to design the whole plant to handle 25 or 30 MGD, you either have a lot of screens in the headworks, a lot of capacity built in that isn't used 95% of the time, right? Because even more frequent events as they occur, um, they're still not occurring every day of the year. most of the time you're operating in that 4 MGD, 5 MGD range. So there's either going to be a lot of equipment unutilized for capacity, or the headworks has to be developed to be more adaptive, more resilient, so that the screens themselves, the system itself, is smart and capable enough to adapt to those conditions. Or I guess the last thing is, we could design the headworks with a wider, clear opening, less capture rate on the screens. So we've been thinking a lot about that, and some of our newest products have been trying to design such that the engineer's design doesn't necessarily have to accommodate for peaking factors. The screen can do that, and you can get maximum capture at average flows. So I think that's a mouthful, and I'm not sure I've described that completely well, but that's what's on our mind right now.
So what about technology advancements though? Like are there what do you see as the next step for your headworks and your screens? You talked about this stormwater element and like some of these challenges that you're trying to address. Is that like changing the way that you're looking at the technology advancement of those pieces of equipment as well? Is there a materials change there? Is that just a sizing change? Yeah, talk a little bit about like that technology advancement. What do you think is that next leap?
Well, I think it changes everything, really. If you're really thinking about managing for those types of events, you either, like I said, you're either going to have a lot of equipment, or your systems have to get a lot smarter and a lot more capable. Our bias is towards minimizing the amount of complexity and really solving the problem in the simplest way possible. So that's the way we have been thinking about uh, that specific problem that we were talking
Hmm.
about previously with peaking factors in the headwork. So we're looking at how the system gets smarter and adaptive, and allows for more flexibility at the plant level for how you manage various conditions, and absolutely maximizes the capture rate during that normal condition. So, if you look at some of our newest designs, we have machines that sense when flows are increasing, adapt to that first of all with operating conditions, speed, and maximizing the removal rate up to 4 times what would be normally available in those environments, so that you can keep the finest opening possible for as long as you can during a storm event. Because what happens in a storm event is that everything that has settled in the collection system gets picked up by that initial surge, that first flush, and all of that debris finds its way to the headworks with quite a bit of velocity behind it. And
Hmm.
so the question is, how do you remove as much of that debris as you possibly can? And then if that flow continues to grow in front of the screen, then the screen itself will change opening size. So it will open to a larger opening, allowing for more of those hydraulics to pass through, with the majority or the vast majority of that first flush solids event being taken out with a fine opening. So that's the way we're thinking about it. And then as the condition starts to return more to normal, while still operating at high speed, the machine will close to the finer opening, and continue to clean itself during that operation. And then finally it will slow to slower speed. So thinking that way about the way that we go about solving for that, um, is is something we spent a lot of time on, and really have innovated around
Hmm.
within the company. So we also recognize that there's an ongoing trend, and there has been for many years, to get finer screening at the headwork. So how do you take out more debris, especially as you get into systems like membrane systems? How do you get to the finest screening possible in order to protect those types of systems? That's really something that we're working on in our R&D
Hmm.
area, as well as some of our testing in the field, around how do we help customers solve for those problems as well. So in the headworks, those are the things that I'm looking at right now. And of
Hmm.
course, fine screening plays into water reuse and recycle
Yeah.
and all of those things, both municipally and industrially. So
Hmm.
um, I think from an innovation standpoint, that happens. Now, when you're trying to deal with um, those massive solid events that come with the peaking factors, um, at the same time maintaining a smaller, the smallest opening size possible for capture rate. You also have to change your materials of construction. You have to change the way the physical screen itself engages. So there are a lot of changes that have to occur in order to facilitate that
Hmm.
new condition. So that's what's been on our mind. So when we ask ourselves, what if, those are the what ifs we've been talking about within Duperen.
It never ceases to amaze me how far the automation of things have come. You're talking about like the opening and closing and like sensing the flows and adjusting in real time, and then also just how detail oriented it gets down to for these R&D folks that you have working for you to make sure that all the little boxes are checked too. So it's not just the big idea, it's also the small little elements that have to be solved too. So it's very, very cool.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, we partnered with Saginaw, the Saginaw municipality here, where our offices are in Saginaw, Michigan, uh, really to get a robust testing of that technology. We've been installed at two sites here in the
Mhm.
community, two different types of environments. Um, and that really gave us a good testing of the technology, of our thought process, of the logic around how we were going to respond in different situations. And so we feel really positive about that from a technology standpoint. But one of the things, if you talk to our R&D engineers or our product owners, that they would tell you as well, is that we are trying to solve for all those things. We're trying to solve for all the details. Um, and we do that with an absolute bias towards doing it in the simplest way possible.
Mhm.
Because it's really easy to get caught into trying to design this really cool machine with all these parts and all this stuff. And then an operator takes a look at it and says, oh my gosh, I have to own that for 20 years. And what's the maintenance going to be on that? And so it's, it's tough to design for simplicity.
Mhm.
But once you've done it, you've really achieved something that's a gift to the customer for decades.
Yeah.
And that's what we shoot for.
So last question here, kind of like looking forward, what excites you about the future of the wastewater market? Sounds like the like business is really great right now, and it looks good for the next couple of years. What's exciting you about the future of the market?
Yeah, I think, you hear in our industry, both from government officials as well as some of our colleagues in manufacturing, that we have a once in a lifetime opportunity. Once in a lifetime opportunity with the level of investment that's coming into our industry. And that can be cliche, because we keep saying it over and over again, but it is really true. Like, we can make a difference today and over the next 5, 10 years, given the amount of funding that we're going to have in the industry and the focus really on rural or underserved communities. We have the opportunity to make a difference, that when we sit down together and I'm 80, Bob, and you're 50, or however those age differentials are, and we have a cup of coffee together, we can look back at this time and say, look what we were able to accomplish. And there's so much talking about what we're leaving our children right now on the negative side, like we're leaving them these problems, we're leaving them those problems. Um, it is really nice and really motivating to have the opportunity to flip that story around and say, look what we left our children,
Hmm.
in a positive way. And so that motivates me. It excites me. I think it excites all of us here at DuParent,
Hmm.
that we get to make a difference for people, for water, and for the planet. And that's what we're about.
Yeah. I love that outlook. That's a great way to look at it of, like we're making moves right now that are going to positively impact change for the next 30 to 50 years, right?
Yeah.
That's a really cool way to look at it. It's really powerful. I actually got a little bit of goosebumps saying that. But yeah, thank you for talking with me today. I really appreciate you taking the time. And for everyone who is watching, please check out the video description below. We'll have some links to some resources from both Mark and Duperrin, as well as some resources on our website, more about the wastewater market, and you can learn more there. And once more to Mark, thank you so much for doing this, and apologies again for your your lights turning off.
Yes. Yeah. As I said, it's part of our sustainability thing here. And if I don't move around enough, then the lights go off in the room. But Bob, sincerely, it's been great to talk to you again. I always enjoy our conversations, whether we're at a show or an event somewhere. And I'm grateful to have had the time to have the conversation with you today. So I
Same
hope
as
you have
a
a great day.
Yeah, same here.